Hello, you're watching Guitar 101 Rammstein, and in this video I'm going to go over how to start getting started learning how to solo for beginners. And even if you're fairly new to learning guitar, don't get discouraged that maybe this is going to be too advanced to start learning how to solo. Because basically I'm going to go over how to play at what we call the Pentatonic Scale, how to find what key to play it in, and how to actually just start practicing that scale along to a backing track so you're playing it musically. From there you'll start learning how to improvise with it and create your own solos. I just got back from a concert I had to play in Berlin, which is pretty far away. It's, I think, 700 kilometers, long train trip we took. Pretty tired, but that's not going to stop me. I'm trying to keep this channel active, so here we go. First off, let's look at the key of A, because that's going to be that's a good place to start. You can find a lot of times where you'll use this scale, this pentatonic scale. Now, the pentatonic scale literally means 5 notes. Penta for 5, tonic for notes. It's probably one of the most useful scales you're going to find in guitar, one of the most commonly used. It fits over many things. And it's also a very easy shape to learn. I find my students learn this. Usually they play through it a couple times and they have it memorized. So I'm going to walk you through it real quick in the key of A, and I'll show you how to play it. We're going to first start on our 6th string, on our E string, at the 5th fret. So go ahead and find your 5th fret, pluck that note with your index finger. Then we're going to use our little finger to go to the 8th fret of the 6th string. So it's going to sound like this. Then on every string is going to start on this 5th fret, so you don't even have to really lift your index finger. You're just going to kind of drag it down as you go down the strings. My 5th string, my A string, is going to be 5th fret to the 7th fret, and I'll use my ring finger for the 7th fret. Alrighty, we're going to see the 2 shapes we need to know for this. That's going to be this 4 fret stretch where we go 5 to 8. That's going to be on the 6th string, the 2nd string, and the 1st string. So your top string and your bottom 2 strings are going to have that stretch with the little finger. Everything else is this real convenient box shape, like this A string where we went 5 to 7. Same pattern on the next string. On the D string, 5 to 7. Same pattern again, 5 to 7 on G. And now these last 2 strings, B is 5 to 8, and E is 5 to 8. Where we use that 8th fret, try to use your little finger. You can, I'm sure, get away with stretching and using your ring finger, but that's going to be a bad habit you'll find eventually, where you're kind of limiting what other things you can add to the scale. So try to use that exact same fingering, 5 to 8, 5 to 7, 5, 7, 5, 7, 5, 8, 5, 8. And of course with the scale we want to play it forwards, and the exact same thing backwards. So it's 8, 5 on the 1st string, 2nd string 8, 5, 3rd string 7, 5, 4th string 7, 5, 5th string 7, 5, 6th string 8, 5. Alright, so one more time forwards and backwards. I'll play it a bit slow for you. Okay, so take some time, go through that a couple of times. See, I think you'll memorize it pretty quick. Once you have that pattern down, then you've actually learned 12 scales, because we can play it in any key we want. We just move the pattern. So I take any 4 frets. Let's say I'll play it in the key of G. I'll go to my 3rd fret. So I'm going frets 3 to 6, 3 to 5, 3, 5, 3, 5, 3, 6, 3, 6. So that pattern is going to work anywhere you want. Just keep in mind the first note we play, that's the key it's going to be in. So if I'm playing the 1st fret, that's the key of F. And if you're not sure what note's what on your E string, I got a video up I just put up recently showing how to find those notes and figure them out. So that's going to help. The only thing that's going to change, I mean, there are different ways to play this scale, of course. There's different shapes. We won't worry about that so much for now. We're going to focus on this main shape, which is the most common one. The only thing that'll change is if you want to play it starting with your open E. And now we're only going to need 2 fingers, because we just have to cover frets 2 and 3. So it's 0, 3, 0, 2, 0, 2, 0, 2 on G, 0, 3 on B, and 0, 3 on E. Alright, one way to look at it is just pretend you have a fret here. And you don't want to really play it this way. It's not so convenient. But that can help you visualize where that same exact shape is. You just pretend that's a fret, where we're not actually having to hold it, obviously, because it's an open string. All right, so now that you've worked with the scale a little bit, and I mean, mainly just try to get it memorized. Don't even worry about being able to speed through it. That's not important. We want to actually try to practice it in more of a musical form. So the best thing to do is, if we're going to start out in this 5th fret, just do a YouTube search for guitar backing track, key of A. It doesn't matter if it's A major or A minor with the pentatonic, so you can use either one. And if you look for those on YouTube, there's tons of them. I'm just going to pick the first one I opened. I just picked one randomly. I haven't heard it before. This says slow rock blues backing track in A minor. And I'm going to show you how to first start out. I'm not going to start soloing right away. I'm actually going to practice this scale in time with the music. And I get to hear how it interacts with the chord changes. Don't worry about the tempo either. The tempo could be fast, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. It doesn't mean you have to play on every beat, like going 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. You could do whole notes, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. Half notes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Find your own pace. It doesn't really matter on the tempo. Just play a note with a longer value if you have to. And maybe you kind of hesitate, don't worry, just stay on a note, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. As long as you're keeping that tempo and keeping the count, coming on a beat, you'll be fine. It's actually, in the long run, it's going to make it more interesting, so you're not playing quarter notes over and over, or eighth notes or whatever. You're changing up your note values for your rhythm. So I'll give a quick demonstration of how I just practice this scale in time with a backing track. I'm going to throw this backing track on and just play the scale over it, basically. I'll go backwards slower, playing whole notes. So that's actually, that's what guitarists do. They learn a scale, they practice it forwards and backwards. That's fine and all. You should do that. But if that's all you do, you're just going to get good at playing that scale. You're not really going to learn how to use it effectively. And if I'm practicing that scale to a metronome, I consider it much better practice. In this case, it's working like a metronome with notes added. So we're hearing how it interacts with a chord progression. So I think this is one of the best ways you can practice for a lot of scenarios. I'm going to, next step is what I really don't want to do if I'm trying to play a solo or a lead melody over something. I don't want to play that scale note for note with all the notes in order. That's just playing the scale. It's the most boring thing you could actually do with it. Basically, what I want to do is jumble those notes up, but I don't want to get lost, because sometimes if we start in the middle or if we start backwards, it's easier to get lost because you're always starting forwards and backwards. One tip for that, by the way, because usually I find if a scale I'm not very familiar with, I have to play it forwards before I can play it backwards. If I try to just play it backwards from scratch, it's easier to get lost. So in that case, I started, when I'm learning a scale, I'll practice it forwards and backwards like normal, but then I'll also just practice it only backwards, something like this. That's going to help you just know that scale like the back of your hand. Eventually, also what I'll do is kind of tear that scale apart and put it back together. A good way to do this is focus on just a couple strings at a time. In this case, let's take my D and G string. So that's that 5-7 on D, 5-7 on G. And I'm going to go forwards, backwards, that kind of thing. And now with those 4 notes, I'll try like a crisscross pattern. take even 3 notes out of it. I'm going to find all these patterns I can possibly, all the patterns I can come up with. And remember, we can repeat notes, we can skip notes, we can go back and forth. We can combine notes. So try all those ideas out. And I'll kind of work on pairs of strings at a time. Maybe my first 2 strings. And I'm going to just really kind of get absorbed in that scale by just focusing on a couple strings at a time. And even in the next step where we start to try to improvise with our notes over a backing track, I can kind of think that way. I'm going to focus on a couple strings and then move it. Another good tip for this to kind of make it more interesting, how your solo is going to sound, is when I'm kind of thinking that way, I've got like these 2 strings, and then if I just go to the next 2 strings, it'll work, but it's going to a lot of times get a little bit more interesting if we vary our range of pitch more. So maybe I'll start with the first 2 strings, and then instead of just going up to the next 2 strings, I'm going to jump up a few strings, maybe on the A and D. So I'm getting more of a variation in range of pitch. So now I'm going to I'll play real simple, just so I'm going to try to make it pretty easy to follow. You don't have to play exactly what I'm playing, but just to give you some ideas of how I'm going to apply this stuff over this backing track. So I'll start the backing track again, and one more thing before I do that. Another thing, when you're doing this without a backing track, it'll sound boring and redundant and repetitive. I could take a really simple 3-note pattern, like after repeating that 4 times, it's like, okay, enough already. When we hear it over a backing track and we hear the chord change, but that melody stays the same, that works really good. I've noticed, for example, like in Leonard Skinner, they do this a lot in their solos, and it's really cool. It's a simple thing, but it's really effective. So I'll start out doing that. I'm going to just play those 3 notes over that where you hear the chord changes, and kind of, it changes the mood of things. So you see, I'm kind of trying to let notes breathe a bit. I didn't so much there. I should have more maybe. But moving around, staking in the same position for a while to kind of focus on different areas of the scale. You might have noticed I did a couple extra things there I didn't show you in the scale. I moved down to this 3rd fret. I did a kind of a chromatic thing here. That's what I'll get into next, actually. This scale, the pentatonic scale, you'll hear people refer to it as the box, because it's kind of box shaped. And you also hear guitarists talking about getting stuck in the box. So they're like, here's my lowest note, they go up, there's their highest note, it's like, okay, turn around, they're kind of stuck there. There's a lot to go into this, but I'm going to show you just 2 extra notes now that you know this shape to kind of start getting you out of that box. We have this 3rd fret of the E string. You don't have to start there. It's just something we can occasionally go to, if we get to our lowest note, so we have a bit of variation. And then when we get to our last note, that 8th fret of the E string, we can go 2 frets over to 10. So that 10th fret of E and the 3rd fret of your low E. Keep those in mind and try to kind of occasionally throw those in there so I can... Toughest one is this 10th fret because we're going to use our little finger most likely to slide over to it. So you can practice like plucking and shifting to that 10th fret with the little finger. Same with this is going to be easier with the stronger index finger. And that'll kind of just get you more and more acquainted with it. Then we'll get to our last note, that 8th fret of the E string. We can go 2 frets over to 10. So that 10th fret of E and the 3rd fret of your low E. Keep those in mind and try to kind of occasionally throw those in there so I can... All there's a lot of notes we can actually add into this pentatonic scale. If we look at the blues scale, it's one note extra. It just played in two spots. So that's going to be on our A string, instead of just a 5/7, we're going to go 5/6/7. Next string, the D string's back to normal, 5/7. And here's where we repeat that note at a higher octave that we added in on the G string. We're going to go, instead of 5/8, or instead of 5/7, we're going to add an 8. So altogether it's like 5/8, 5/6/7, 5/7, 5/7/8, 5/8, 5/8. There's a lot more too we can add. A lot of this chromatic sequences work really nice if you use them a little bit sparingly. Don't put, if you're playing too many chromatic notes, you're going to just play a chromatic scale. Chromatic notes, a chromatic scale, if you're not familiar with it, that's every note. It's all 12 notes, so we could play it on one string, just playing every fret until we hit fret 12. Alright, when I say chromatic sequence, I'm just talking a few notes in a row, fret, 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 you know. That kind of thing. And also another thing to consider when you're experimenting with this is phrasing, where I said let a note hang for a while. We can let that note sustain. If you learn vibrato, that's a good place to kind of let it sustain and then add in a bit of vibrato. And I can space it out a little bit that way, so I'm not just playing note, 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 note nonstop. That'll help with your phrasing. And it also buys you a bit of time to think of what to do next. So if I'm going to try to like do a jump across some strings, like I'm thinking, okay, let's jump to my B string, to that 8th fret. And now let's go to that 3rd fret, that new note we added, to the E string, to the 6th string. Alright, so that should be enough right there just to get you started. And just like I said, if you play exactly what I'm showing you at this 5th position, starting at fret 5, that's the key of A. So look up a backing track in the key of A. Major or minor, doesn't matter with pentatonic. It will matter if you're trying to play another, like a diatonic scale, like the A major scale over a A minor backing track, it's going to clash. Pentatonic is very forgiving. You can get away with any key, basically. So next, I'm going to kind of drag this video out a little longer, I think. We'll get a little bit more advanced with it, of how to practice the scale. And here's a really good method to help you just with finding new patterns within the scale. And I'm going to go 4 steps forwards, 4 notes forwards and 2 notes back, and I'm going to keep going through the scale that way. So I'm going the first 4 notes and now backing up 2 notes. And from this note, that 8th note where my little finger is, I'm going to go 4 notes forwards, backwards 2 notes, and then 4, 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, backwards 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2. We can also do the same thing backwards. Those are, you can change the numbers, you know. I can do 5. Backwards 1, backwards 2. You can come up with a lot of ideas this way with it. And don't forget the chords. We can grab especially this 5th fret. It's really convenient. We can bar off and 7th fret works nice in the middle strings. Another cool one if you're starting out, it's not hard to learn. It's kind of like a pseudo sweep pick. You don't even have to get all the notes to do a normal sweep pick. We can actually even use that mute, where I'm going to play my 5th fret of the 1st string of the E string, but instead of just plucking that note, I'm going to spice it up a little bit. So I'm going to, if you can do it either way. I can either push down hard enough to make all the notes ring out, or I can kind of like I'm focusing just making that last note work, and I'm covering these other frets, but I'm getting a mute. So we get this kind of, it's just a more interesting way than just starting with a plucked note like that. So that's it for this one. Like I said, if maybe you find a backing track that's in a different key than A and you want to play over it, no problem. Check out the video. I'll try to link it to here. You'll see it at the very end of the video, where I'm showing you where to find your notes on the fretboard, and then you're gonna just go, okay, I want to play in the key of C, and you find here's C on the E string. Yeah. And there you go. That's where you'll move it for that particular backing track if it's in the key of C. So that's it for this one. Thanks for watching. I'm trying to keep this channel alive with all these new YouTube policies, so always appreciate a like, a subscribe, any comments I try to answer. That's it, and more to come soon.